Hi, my name's Gerry. I am a Honda outboard motor owner. And here's my motor. If you own an outboard and you're going to do this yourself, come on along. It's not difficult, but see how I do it. There's a lot of tricks that I do. I think it will help you. Just below this video, in Show More, there are links to most of the items used in my videos in case you are trying to locate them. What is one of the first things that you need to do? Well, you need to get some old clothes and put them on because you're going to get dirty. All right, we're ready. Let me show you some things that you need. Find your manual. It's important. It's got lots of information in there. What we're going to do is for a motor that is a Honda 1.3 horsepower outboard, air-cooled. Your motor will have similar ways to service it like I'm going to do, but you need to have the manual, so go find it first. There are two fluids that we are going to change in this motor. One is the crankcase oil, and the other one is the lower end gear lube. These are the ones that I use, but your manual may require you to do something different. Let me briefly talk about something. I don't need to do this, but you may. If you live in a climate where water freezes, you need to winterize this motor because it's not likely you're going to be using it for months on end. How do you do that? You need to get all of the gasoline out of here. Right here, there is a slot in the casing. There's a screw you can see here. Make sure this is level. Turn that screw. It's in the bottom of the carburetor. Open up your vent or take your cap off, loosen it up, and the fuel that's in the fuel tank and in the carburetor will run out. Do this someplace where you're ventilated. Catch it in a container, get it into a gas can. Just be careful. You got open fuel. Don't be smoking or doing something that might cause a fire. Once you get done, put that screw back in. Another thing you need to do, pull the cowling off. You'll see me do that later with this one. You can get something like this. It's called fogging oil. The manual for this motor says you can use regular engine oil. Take your spark plug out. You put a teaspoon of engine oil in there, or you put fogging oil in there, just a little squirt. Put the spark plug back in. Slowly pull the motor over a few times to get that oil spread throughout the cylinder. Put the spark plug back in. Pull this until you feel you are on a compression stroke. It's looser until that piston comes all the way to the top, and then it stops. So then stop there. You'll never see that in a manual. You won't see that anyplace else. This is a 4-cycle engine. There are valves inside that open up in the combustion chamber to let fuel in, and after it's burned, to let the exhaust out. If you have either of those valves in the open position for months on end, that's how you can get air inside the cylinder and moisture, and the cylinder walls will rust. That's the purpose of the oil, is to help. But one other thing is to get the piston in the upper position on the compression stroke and leave it there. Prior to doing that for the winter, you should be changing your crankcase oil, which is what we're going to do, and changing the lower unit lube. And we're going to do that too. I am located in Central Florida. I fish 12 months out of the year. I want to put additives in my fuel so that the fuel does not deteriorate over time. I buy ethanol-free fuel. That's the only thing I use. I use it in this, my weed whacker, my lawnmowers, everything. Small engines, particularly because they can cause major problems with your carburation system. Ethanol-free has less problems. So I buy ethanol-free. You might have to look for it. I buy it usually in a 5-gallon can because I use it for things other than here. But prior to doing that, I add a fuel additive, stabilizer. There's different brands. What I use the most, it's called Seafoam, but like you can see, there are many other brands. I add that to my 5-gallon can. at the gas station. Then I fill up the can, I bring it home, and then I put it in a smaller container that I work from for the outboard. This is what I put it in. It's a 1 gallon can. This is a very safe can, and I'll explain why. The top turns. There's a little thing on the end for any kind of dripping that you can keep so it's, when you get done, there's a push button here. When you put this in, take the cap off, put this in, get it all the way so it sits all the way in. When I push that button, it will stop letting fuel out down at that level. So I can add fuel by pushing the button and it will stop on its own. Then I can pull it out, get a drip like that, put that over there, and I'm gone. But this fuel is already treated by me when I put it in the 5 gallon can. That's a big deal. But as I already talked about, if you're not keeping fuel in this and you're storing it for the winter, drain the entire fuel system and then put that screw underneath here back in. So in the spring or whenever you go to use this again, you put fresh fuel in, pull your starter, and you're going fishing. You need tools. This is a socket set, various sides, spark plug sockets, extensions, 3/8 inch drive. In addition to that, I have a whole bunch of tools here in my tool bag. I don't use many of them, but there's a few that you may need, so I have them with me. I also have a supply of rags, shop towels, rags to clean things up, a whole roll of paper towels because you're going to need them. I have a marine grease. This is made by OMC. There are other companies that make them. It just has to be a waterproof grease. It's pretty thick. I've had this for a long time. You need a grease gun and marine grease in it. You're going to get dirty. If you want, you can put on throwaway gloves. I need a way to pour oil into the engine. There's a couple of ways to do that. This is a long stemmed container because the filler that's in here is kind of difficult to get to. I also have this contraption, and I'll show you about this later. This works very well, and it has a shut-off, so you can turn it upside down, let some oil in, turn it off again, and then get it back out without it continuing to pour out. Another tool you may need, particularly to get the screws off that hold the lube in the lower unit, or to get the screw that's right here on the side to let the crankcase oil out. Sometimes they kind of get on there hard and it's hard to get loose with just a hand tool. This is a impact driver. You put a fitting on the end, whatever it is, Phillips or straight, rotate this, and then you hit the end of it when it's on the screw with a hammer, and this will push in hard and do just a little turn, and that tends to break the item free so you can get them in and out. Go in your kitchen when your spouse is not looking. Underneath the stove, pull out that big drawer. There's usually a container in there like this. They use this for roasting turkeys. If you get caught taking that, run. But this one I bought it at a thrift store. You can get them at garage sales, all kinds of things. I wouldn't recommend taking it from your house. But you take this, get a 13-gallon tall kitchen can garbage bag, and I'll show you what you do with that. This is a magnetic tray. So if you have something metal like this hook or a screw or a nut, you can throw it in there, you turn it, it won't come out. You don't wind up losing your small parts on the ground or all over. This works really handy. Harbor Freight sells them for like $1.99 a piece, so they're priceless when you really want to use them. And let me show you just one other item here. When you take your propeller off on the bottom of the motor, you're going to do that for a number of reasons, mostly just to check to make sure that the shear pin in there is okay and that the propeller has not grabbed a whole bunch of fishing line somehow, and it's wrapped around the shaft, and there's a seal inside that keeps that lube in there. You don't want to damage that. So you need to pull that off, make sure it's clean. When you put it back on, you're going to put the cotter pin back in. That cotter pin is a stainless steel one when it comes from the factory. If you're not in salt water, it's not that critical. As long as you do, keep an eye on it. If you can, replace it with a stainless steel cotter pin. Where do you get them? Well, you can get Honda ones where they are extremely expensive. What are we talking about expensive? 15 bucks maybe if you're going to get it online, because you have to pay shipping and all that kind of stuff. I went to a local dealer and bought one for about $4. Not a bad price. Another place, great place to get them, go to a hardware store. I went to Home Depot. This is a stainless steel 2-inch by 1/8 inch cotter pin. That's what's originally there. So this would be the exact same thing as what came from the factory, and they're about it. Well, they're less than $1.50. I don't remember, it was like $1.29 or something like that. Best place to go buy them. Now your manual says everything you need to know, all your capacities, what things you need to service, tells you where they are and how to take care of them, what spark plug you have, the gap, fuel capacities, and what kind of fuel to put in it. So get your manual out. I've done this enough. I don't need to necessarily refer to this all the time, so I have it with me, but let's get going. Okay, here's my motor. It's a 2.3. I think I might have said 1.3 earlier. It's a Honda. It's a 4-cycle, and it's the motor that came with my boat, which this is a Twin Troller X10. Fantastic boat. What are we going to do first? Well, let's make sure we don't make too much of a mess. Remember that bag? And open it up. The can. Put it in. You take this, push it in, and everything that you have, oil, grease, rags, anything that's dirty goes in here. I put it underneath there, and I'll show you at the end how wonderful that idea is. Okay, let's start at the bottom. There are 2 screws here, one here and one here. You need to take both of these out. So use and see how it won't come out? Let me show you what we're going to do. This is the impact driver I showed you. I have a straight bladed tip on it. Fits in here very well. There's an adjustment. You turn this one way or another so that when I hit this, it will turn it counterclockwise and break this loose. So I get that on there, get it on straight, take a hammer, and that time it got it loose. See it? So I'm going to take this one out, but I want to get the other one loose first, in case it's just as tight. And I've tipped it up like this so I can get to it a little bit better. And naturally that won't come out either. So okay, and sure enough, it's now loose. Let me put the motor back down. So now I'm going to take the 2 screws out. I take one. I got the second one. So now I'm going to take the 2 screws out. I take one. I got the second one. Now I don't want to lose the 2 screws, so I clean them off. Put them in here. Now these are clearly not magnetic. They're stainless, I'm assuming, so they don't want to stick to the magnet, but that's okay. I now know where they are. I'm going to put this all the way down because I want that to drain as much as I can, and I'm just going to let this sit here and drip. Here's something important to look at. See this lube? It's been a year since it's been in there, and it's clear. There isn't any milkiness to it or dirt or debris, anything in there. That tells me that the seals that are here on the back side of the propeller have not leaked, or there's a seal right here, or the screws that I put in, they haven't leaked water into the lower unit. That's good. That's what you're hoping for. So let's remove the propeller. These are needle nose regular pliers, whatever you got. Pieces of metal that I bent over last time I did this to keep it from falling out. With there. So now I've got them kind of both close together, and I can squeeze them. And now they're fairly straight. If I go around, turn it upside down, grab a hold of the cotter pin, grab a hold of it, and work it up. Now in my case, I'm going to replace the cotter pin, so I don't care if I damage it. There. See, if you had it nice and straight, this is all kind of, from it being bent over, this would have come out easier. And off comes the propeller. Now I check under here, make sure there's any debris. Let me just point out, this is not the original propeller that comes with the twin troller or with this Honda. The original one is a plastic one. I found this and it's the same size, same pitch, so I bought this and put it on. The reason why I did that was the blades on the plastic one were getting kind of nicked up. These don't do this. This will go through some grass and things like that without getting all kind of chewed up a little bit. So I like that. So that's what I used. Now there's a shear pin right here. You can see it sticking out. I'm going to turn it 90 degrees so it just doesn't fall out. But this comes out. This is the shear pin. I don't know if you can see that. I broke one of these and I had to replace it. I went to a Honda dealer, and as strange as this sounds, he only had one, and I wanted to buy several. He only had one. He said, I've never seen anybody break that. So he didn't even carry them. This is the bottom, the front of the motor, and right here on the bottom, there's this little holder. Comes from the factory. It's already preloaded with 2 cotter pins and 2 shear pins in there. So when I broke that one, I put one of these in. I put that in the bottom, and later on I got another one, the one from the dealer, and I slid it in here. So I now have this full set. So I don't go out fishing and have an issue where I don't have a cotter pin or a shear pin to get back in. Now, if you break this out on the water, you can't fix this in the boat. The easiest is from land. So I came in with the electric motors when I did that, and that's how I got home. So the lower end is still draining, but not by much. Let me wipe it off. Now, in here is where I was talking about fishing line might be, or weeds or something like that. And you can see this? That's the remnants of weeds, which is good. I don't want fishing line in here. There's a seal right here, and I don't want it sitting in here trapped underneath the propeller and digging into this seal, and then eventually you've got a real problem, because then you got to pull this whole thing apart, replace seals and all that kind of thing. I'll show you in a second how to put this back on, but first let's put lube back in here, because I'm not really seeing anything more leak out. This thing doesn't hold much. It's only I don't know how many ounces, but it's not many. So I think we got everything out. Now, I showed you this before. This is the lube that I use for the lower end. I actually have 2 bottles of this. And why do I do that? When this bottle gets down to like halfway, when you're trying to squeeze this to push it in, you got to squeeze the bottle way tight, so it works better if you've got it full or mostly full. I take this, I put this up against the lower hole, and I squeeze it until it starts to come out the top, and then I hold it in there, and then I'm going to take one of these screws and put it in the top. You see all the stuff and looks like dirt all over this? These are tiny, tiny, tiny little bugs. I just recently lubed around here. I do that occasionally, not just every year. So this was all clean just a couple of weeks ago. And all those tiny little bugs get stuck in the grease. So let me clean all this. Wow. It looks like that's all grease, but it's not. It's the remnants of the bugs. And I throw this in that thing so I don't have to deal with it. Turns out to be a great garbage can at the end. Now you need to add a lube right here, all the way around here and here, because this yoke holds this shaft, and when you turn the motor to go different directions, this goes back and forth, or when you turn it all the way around and go in reverse, it will be there. So there's got to be some lube. Now they tell you in the manual to use a regular grease. It's that black grease that you see that's oozing out of here and here, wheel bearing grease, that kind of stuff. That's pretty nasty. It gets all over everything. If you touch it, it gets all over you. I use something called Super Lube. Buy this in a large 1-pound container. I move it into, these are old pill bottles or something, and I put it in here. It's clear. It's a man-made lubricant, really good stuff. They use it for all kinds of things. I just coat this surface all the way around, and then I take some more and I coat it on here all the way around, because this is the surface that it mates with. And then I take this, push it in, and I spin the motor around. Back and forth, spreading that grease all over. Okay? So there's one part. The manual says that you should take this off and lubricate this, or at least clean it. And I'll explain what this is. This sets the angle of the transom. It moves the yoke farther out or all the way in. For this boat, all the way in is the best position. And you just put it in position and tighten it back down. But on this other side, there's a funny shaped head, and it has to fit in a little slot. So make sure that that's all the way in, and then tighten this. Now you can't take this all the way out. It's fixed and it can't come out. So it's not something you really need to adjust or anything like that. This nut's got a spring on it here. This puts tension on the shaft so that as you turn the motor, it will either turn extremely easily with this loose, or you can tighten it up so that it would put more friction on here and you can't turn it as easily. So they tell you to take this out. I take the spring off, if you can see it. Just take the spring off. I clean the shaft. I clean the spring. I clean the area that it screws into. And for the same kind of reasons, I take the Super Lube, put a little dab on my finger, and I run it on the threads. I don't want to use much, because I don't want it collecting the dirt and the debris. Spring back on, screw this back in. I like it fairly loose, but if I make it tighter, it stays there, but I'm stiff to move this. So I've got it relatively loose, but this can just vibrate out, plop in the water. If that happens, you just got to go get another one from a Honda dealer and put it back in. Okay, next we're going to do this. This is the arm for the throttle control. Now remember, this cable goes underneath this arm. This surface area, I clean. And then there are two items here. What was up against here is a washer and this plastic thing here. So I'm going to wipe them off. They're actually quite dirty under there. Okay, I got them clean. I'll set them aside, but let me show you something. See the hole here? There's a good size hole, but this is a small hole. So this washer has to be the one that goes here. I'll put it right there. And then this pushes out, and there's the same kind of thing as there. Plastic piece, and then a washer. But the hole on this washer is way bigger. So I'm going to clean all this, clean the threads, I clean the surface that all this revolves around. I clean the plastic piece, just like I did on the other side. And now I'm going to clean the surface here, and in here as best I can. Now there's a rubber grommet that stays in there that you don't take out, but the only way you can clean its surface is kind of by wadding up some material and a rag and kind of stuffing it in there a little bit. But I think I got it pretty good. And then I'm going to put this back together that same way. Take the super lube, get a little bit on my finger. Doesn't take much. You're only trying to coat the surface a little. Put a little bit on the threads. Coat each side of this washer, the metal one. Put that on. Coat the plastic piece. Slide that on. This goes through here. Goes through that plastic piece. That plastic, the two plastic pieces face each other and go inside the arm. And now we got to get this back in the hole. Okay, got it most of the way in, and let me tighten it the rest of the way. You want it snug. You don't have to crank it down. Now that's what this does. You can see this goes back and forth, and it wobbles a little because of the grommet that's inside there. So that's done. Let's do something else. In here, there are two long bolts. They squash this bracket to the transom, hold the motor to the boat. So you unscrew these, you put a little lube on it, you run them back up and down. That's pretty self-explanatory, so I'm not going to bother showing that to you. It's not hard. Now on this side of the motor, there's a little lever right here that you push, that when the motor is in the locked up position, that releases the motor so you can put it back down. So let me show you what it does. You have to put it up and you got to turn the motor to get it to go all the way up. And then that little arm holds it in place. And they tell you to clean it and put a tiny little dab of lube on here and down the side so that this can slide up and down without it being an issue. Now you can see right here there's a grease fitting right here, a Zerk fitting. So you're going to use a grease gun. But most grease guns on the end collect a little bit of debris just from sitting around from the grease that's stuck on the end. So I always squirt a little out and then wipe it off just to have the end clean. I put it over the grease fitting and then I squirt some grease in it and you can see it's coming out. I don't want that to go all over, so I'm going to try and capture it now before it makes a mess. Then I'm going to put the motor down. And I'm going to spin it. If you put this handle in the air, you can spin it around and around and around and around as much as you want. So we've got everything below the motor now done. Let's do up inside the motor itself. How do you get the cowling off? You pull this rubber thing down that releases the back end. The front end's got little feet that go in these two slots. You can't really get the whole thing off very well. So I'm going to pull this up. I put an overhand knot in it so it can't retract. Okay, so that's as far in as it can go. I get that lid out of my way. So what do we have to do in here? We've got to lube this thing. We've got to take the tank off. We've got to get under here. There's some linkage here that we want to lube. We're going to change the spark plug and do that. So how do we do that? Okay, we're going to use a 10 millimeter socket. And there are two bolts that hold the fuel tank on and a washer. So don't lose them. Then you just grab a hold of the whole tank and come up. Now it's still connected with a fuel line here, so you can't go too far with it, but you can get it a little bit out of your way. Take the arm, go over backwards so it gets out of my way. I want to turn it here. I don't think that you can see this too well. Here is the throttle arm inside. So when you turn the handle, the throttle goes back and forth. And there's a cable here. So I am going to clean that. Just kind of rubbing a rag around everything that I can get my rag around. And I am getting some dirt off. And then where the cable itself attaches to the arm, because that's kind of rotating, there's an end on it that has a lead piece on the end that's rotating back and forth. So take a little bit of the super lube or grease, whichever way you want to do it. I like to do it this way so it doesn't make a mess. Put it around there. Now this part slides in and out, and they tell you to clean all this surface off, which actually it does have some dirt. And it probably has dirt because they tell you to lube this where it goes through. And when you do, any kind of bugs and stuff and dirt really stick to it. So it's kind of causing its own issue, but that's what they want you to do. So I'm going to do that. Take a little bit of super lube, cleaning off the surface that's sticking out. I'll put a little bit on it here so when it goes in, it will get on the other end. And then inside, I've lubed it here. So now that goes easily. We can now put this back together. How do you do that? Well, you got to make sure, first of all, the fuel line isn't caught in here. It goes on the outside of the little, there's two big circles here, kind of like a pipe. And this foot and that foot goes inside each of those things that look like a pipe. This goes on the outside. So you put it in there, get the other foot started. Once they're in and they're going through the top at the same time, then I push it all the way back down. I take the washers that I took off, I clean them. Take this washer that I took off, and these are steel, so they stick to that magnet really well. Two nuts get put on. How tight do we put them? I get it until it stops, I guess I should say, right there. And then I go just a little bit more till it's snug. These are only plastic that they're going through, so you don't want to crush it, just to snug it. Because you don't want to crack that fuel tank, you'll have fuel leaking out all over. What are we going to do next? Let's do the spark plug. Okay, here's the spark plug here. Grab a hold of it, wiggle it until it comes off. Then I can kind of tuck it under here. Now there's a little catch that grabs the wire. So when you get all done, we're going to put it back under there. But right now I got it here. This is a 5/8 inch socket. It's pretty windy. You can hear the wind making funny noises against the house. Okay. All right, here's the spark plug. Let's look at it. Spark plug is an NGK. It's got an R on it for resistance. And it's a CR4HSB as in boy on the end. And it actually looks very good. It's very clean. So it's not oil fouled or anything like that. It's actually quite good shape. So I'm going to reuse this spark plug. About every other year I change it, unless it looks bad, but I've never had one that looked bad. And ones that I've taken out that looked like this, I've put in one in my emergency bag that's always in the boat so that I always have a spark plug to put in if I had to, but I've never had to. And that plug is a factory plug, and hopefully you can see this. The gap is 0.024 to 0.028 inches, or 0.6 to 0.7 millimeter. And let's check it and see what it is. This is a feeler gauge spark plug. Let me check the gap. Here's a set of feeler gauges. This one's 024, 025, and 028. I don't have an 026 or 27. So this is one extreme it's supposed to be. This is the other extreme. So the 028 won't quite fit in. The 024 fits in there way too loose. And the 025 fits in there nice and snug, but not so tight that it doesn't go in. So we're between the 24 and the 28, which is where it's supposed to be, so that's what I'm going to put on here. Take a little bit of this grease, just a little bit. I put it on the top part of the plug, and this is in the manual. It tells you to do this. I'm not putting on a lot, just a little. I take a rag, I clean off inside the hole to make sure there's no debris or dirt in there that's around the hole. See, I got that a little bit off. And then I'm going to put the spark plug back in. But as you notice, I'm doing it with my hand because I want to make sure it doesn't get cross-threaded. So it's in and it's going in without any issues. So I know that it's correctly threaded. I got it on here, it's snug. I'm going to turn it about a quarter turn, and that's about it. If this was a brand new spark plug, you do the same thing, but it has a crush washer, which this still has underneath there. But if it was a new plug, that crush washer needs to be squished a little. So you actually turn this about a half a turn. You're not trying to put it on there really, really hard. Now we're going to put this on. This is the boot. Put it on. I'm going to wiggle it, make sure it's all the way in. And remember I told you about this has a little thing here that captures the spark plug wire. So I just kind of eased it back up again. Spark plug's done. Lubrication underneath the hood is done. What have we got left? Got to change the oil. So how much crankcase oil is in this? The manual says that there is 0.26 quarts, US quarts in here, or 100 milliliters. I have it written there that I looked it up. That's a quarter of a quart. A quart's 32, a half a quart would be 16. Half of that to make a quarter would be 8 ounces. So it's just a hair over 8 ounces. So a cup of oil. That's not a lot of oil, but it's really important to have it in there, and they're in there by the right amount. So let's do that. As you can see right now, the engine looks fairly straight up and down. I had to raise the tongue of the trailer to make the transom angle change to be like this. I want this up and down when I'm doing the oil. And let me show you what I'm talking about. See the angle? I raised the tongue to make the trailer at an angle higher in the front. And that made the rear end transom go from whatever it was to more like this. Now I have experimented with changing the oil in this a couple of times, and maybe I'm not 100% where I'm going to wind up at the end, but I'm doing this different than sometimes I've done in the past. If you don't have anything, tools or anything like that, this is the filler. This is where you add oil. The plastic plug. That's what it looks like if you just says oil on it. That's where you put oil in. And where the oil comes out is right there where that Phillips head screw is, right there. If I open that up, the oil pours all over all of this. That's part of the reason why I have the bucket here to catch that. But sometimes it will run down the arm. It really makes a mess. Here's something else that I've been doing lately. This is an oil extraction pump, 12 volt. And here it is in real life. It's like this. And it has alligator clips. I've clipped them to the battery posts already. Got a switch on it, turns it on and off. A skinny little hose that fits very well. Matter of fact, I always clean this off just to make sure there's no debris, because I'm going to stick this in the engine. I stick this all the way in. Try and get as far in as I can. And then on the other end is where the oil comes out. Down here. 8 ounces isn't that much, but it makes a mess. So I want to do it in a way that I can get this oil out of here with the least amount of mess. So I have a little bottle. It's a soda bottle. It came with a little cap to put over the end, because clearly in the box after you use it, oil leaks out. So I put it in here. I throw it in my little bucket on the bottom. Now this is a little bit noisy, so bear with me. But I got my hose here. I got the motor vertical. As you can see, it's pulling the oil out. Going down there. Okay, now that didn't take long. You're not seeing any more oil come out of here. In the past, taking this screw off to see after I've done this, to see how much is still in there. And virtually there's nothing left, a couple of drops. So I'm done getting the oil out. Now all I got to do is worry about getting roughly 8 ounces back in there. Let me show you how I do that. I decided maybe I should show you what is still in there if I take that screw out. So I've got paper towels here to catch anything that comes out. For anybody who says, I didn't get it all, you're right. There were 3 drops I did not get. Let me wipe this off. So now I know, and you know, that if I do it with the oil extractor, it does get all the oil. There. Nice and tight, and we're done. All the old oil is out. Okay, I showed you this earlier. This is a bottle of oil, and it's got this little contraption that I bought at Walmart. So this has a shut-off here you can turn. Now it's off, and the other way is on. Got a little spout at the top. So I can tip this over. I turn it on, and oil fills up this whole tube. Now it's going in. And the oil is pouring down inside. It's got a long little spout that makes it all the way in there. It's pretty handy. All right. Now, I'm not sure if that's the right amount or not. I filled this tube up twice and let it run in. And let's check it. Now I can see a window on the side that it is not full yet. So I'm going to fill that tube one more time, turn it off, and now I'm letting it drain in. Okay, and you know what? It's exactly where it should be. So 3 times filling that tube, put it to exactly where it should be. And let me try to see if I can show you this. Pretty much between those 2 white dots, the little line on the right and there's a line on the left. And just take into account also that the motor is not exactly horizontal, but we're right there. If the oil level was a little bit too high, all I gotta do is stick this back in, turn it on, and just reach in and just suck a little bit out until I get to the correct height. Let's put the cap on the top. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult to get your fingers in here, but I got it on, I got it tight. We're done. Remember how I tied a knot in here? I'll untie this, but there's something I want to show you. Okay, you got the knot untied. See this little metal thing here? It's a little guide to keep this line so that it goes in here correctly down the middle. See it? And it sits in a little slot. So you just got to make sure that you got that there. And then we put the top back on. See the little 2 little things in the front? They go in first. And on the back, there's a little rubber piece here. It has to go down in a slot. Pull this down and it hooks over there. And guess what? We're done with servicing this motor for a whole nother year. But let me show you some other things. This in the middle here is called a bearing buddy. And on inside the bearing buddy, there is a spring-loaded contraption. That's just some water that gets inside the cup. And this ring, when you put pressure on here, this ring sticks out. It's spring-loaded. It pushes the grease all the way into the bearings. It's loaded with grease all the way in. You put a grease gun on, and you see that ring in the middle? It's pushing out. And that's the way how that works. And then you just take the bearing buddy bra, put it back on, and sometimes you gotta burp the air out of it. I just recently greased them. So you do both sides. This is the coupling, so that when I'm out fishing, I'm sure that I'm gonna get back and still have a trailer. If you lift this lever up, it releases something that catches the ball, and inside here is the ball riding in here, and it captures the ball like this. I take a rag, shop rag kind of like this, and I clean it all out as best I can, and then there's a lubricant that's made, it's a Teflon ball coupling lubricant that I have that I reach in with a finger and I smear it around. The purpose of it is to have the tongue, which has got weight on it, and it's going back and forth as you're going down the road, and keeps it from wearing the metal. So there's some kind of lube on there. You remember this? The super lube. One of the other properties of this is that it is a dielectric grease. And I take a little dab. You can see it already on here, so I'm not going to add more. There is dielectric grease on all of these, and then I connect this to the back of the tow vehicle where the connector, I put it on and off a couple of times, and it smears it around. And that protects it from corrosion or moisture or all kinds of things and helps the electrical connection. Now, what's another place that I use this, the dielectric grease? It's on the fittings, on the electrical fittings on the front of the pedals. I just pull one off. You can see some already on there because I do it every once in a while. And I smear some on there. And I smear some on the connector on the front of the pedal. And then I put them back in, pull them out, and I do that a couple of times to smear it all over. And I do both of them. And I do that on an occasional basis. It keeps any kind of moisture from getting in there, protects any corrosion. It works well. It's a dielectric grease. I told you that I would explain how important this plastic trash bag and this container is. And let me show you. Turn it inside out. It's full of all the oil, rags, grease. Pull it tight, and I'm done. This goes in the garbage. This is pretty much clean. Remember, don't use your wife's one out of the kitchen. That's hazardous to your health. So if you like this, I have also done previously videos about me doing very similar things. I've done them in different ways. If you want to look at those, they're on my playlists. You can see them below. Got lots of videos on fishing and my twin troller and repairs and changes that I've made. Have a nice day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.